Hello everyone, Dr. Mike here, TCOM 101, Ball State. In this video I want to talk about something we'll call the rise of personalized media. In this video we're going to look at media history in a way that I hope you find interesting. Now, here's the model that we're going to use, the framework for this discussion of media history. Here's the basic thesis. I'm going to argue that each medium of communication develops or evolves in a roughly similar or parallel way, that each technology follows a certain pattern that we can call the elite, popular, specialized pattern of media development, EPS, elite, popular, specialized. Okay, this model suggests that within any culture, each medium will develop along very similar lines, the same kind of rough pattern. Okay. So each medium will broadly follow this EPS model, elite, popular, specialized, evolutionary pattern. Now, I first read about this many years ago in a little book called Media Messages and Men by a couple of mass communication scholars, Merrill and Lowenstein. And in this book, there was a thin chapter in which they discussed this model or this idea about how media have developed. So this is the basic model we're going to start with, and then we're going to extend this model a little bit to reflect some of the realities of the 21st century. But EPS, elite, popular, specialized. Think of each stage in terms of the evolution of not only the audience, who's paying attention and using the medium, but also the content of each medium. What's the basic nature of the content? So think of the audience and the accompanying content. Now, the first stage, of course, is the elite stage. And in this stage, when a technology comes out or a media emerges, it appeals to and is consumed by the rich people, the affluent people, the trendsetters, or what we also call the opinion leaders. These are the people who have the resources and the knowledge to start to access a new technology. Now, let's talk about newspapers. Did you know that newspapers go back to about 1690 in America? The very first newspaper was Benjamin Harris's Public Occurrences, both foreign and domestic, the first U.S. newspaper published in Boston. Now, in the early days of newspapers, the elite stage, only the higher educated, the literate, the affluent folks could have access to the newspapers, and most people were not literate back in colonial America. And you had to be very smart to be able to read these newspapers. They used a lot of references to Greek and Roman mythology and Shakespeare, and it took a big brain to be able to access this and deep pockets. The very first magazine in America came out in 1741, the American Magazine. Again, it was aimed at the elites. Many of the early magazines were aimed at the high class in society. Here's something called the Gentleman's Magazine, aimed at the elites in colonial America. You know, there's a very interesting model that comes from sociology, created by a scientist named Everett Rogers, and it's called diffusion of innovation. And it's very it has some similarities with the elite, popular, specialized pattern. But let me talk about Rogers' model, about how innovation gets diffused or spread through society. He argues that when a technology emerges, it goes through these stages. You have this early stage with the innovators and the folks he calls the early adopters. To me, this represents the elite stage. Then the technology kind of explodes and gets very popular. And eventually the majority of people have the technology. This is called the early and then the late majority. But this to me is the popular stage. Now, Rogers refers to the laggards, the people who come in at the tail end. Okay, this is not my concern in this lecture. Okay, but I'm definitely interested in the early stage and the popular stage. So an early adopter, these are the elite stage. Really, an early adopter is the kind of the person who rushes out to buy the technology, who wants to be the trendsetter. And this comes from Everett Rogers and his theory on the diffusion of innovations that was published back in the 1960s, early adopter. All right, well, what about the elite stage of radio and television? And this is the period of experimentation and innovation. All right, there are a number of important figures, historical figures in this period, because these are the founding parents, the founding fathers of and mothers of radio and TV. Okay? So this is a fascinating history, and I just don't have time to explain it in depth in this short video. Okay? But the elite stage to me includes progress made by incredibly brilliant scientists and inventors like James Clerk Maxwell, who back in the 19th century theorized about the existence of electrical energy, of radio waves. Okay, and then Heinrich Hertz, who went in a laboratory and actually proved that these radio waves exist. We still honor him by using the term Hertz as a unit of measurement in the telecommunications world. Then we've got folks like Marconi, who sent the first transatlantic radio message in 1901. And folks like Nikola Tesla, maybe the most wonderful genius of them all, who really is the father of radio. In 1889, he was using radio waves to demonstrate a radio-controlled boat. But these are the tremendous innovators. There are certainly others. Edward Howard Armstrong, who gave us FM radio in the 1930s, and Lee DeForest, who invented the audion tube, a critical piece of technology that enabled voice radio and the ability of radio to broadcast real sound, voice, and music. And then we've got the founding fathers of television. We'll talk more about these folks later, but Philo Farnsworth, who is really the founding father of TV, who demonstrated the very first all-electric television system in the world, and Vladimir Zworykin, a Russian immigrant who came to this country and who was key in developing a working TV system in the 1930s. But anytime we talk about these folks, we're talking about the elite stage, the innovation, experimentation stage, the earliest stage in the development of each medium, whether it's radio or TV. Now, let's say a new technology emerges, the inventors create it. What happens next? Well, sometimes it doesn't pick up any traction and it falls by the wayside. But if it has utility, there's a good chance the technology could reach the popular stage. And that's when it becomes really popular and it starts to appeal to the masses. Okay? What happened in the world of newspapers? The early newspapers were aimed at the elites, but in the 1830s, newspapers hit the popular stage because of something called the penny press that emerged. Okay, the price of a newspaper went down to a penny, so it was affordable to the masses, to the public, and they changed the content. Okay, they made it more appealing to the public. More crime news, more sensationalism. Penny press were cheap tabloid-style newspapers that were mass-produced starting in the 1830s, but they allowed newspapers to explode into the popular stage. You know, the same thing happened with magazines. The early magazines were aimed at the elites, but in the middle of the 20th century, magazines became hugely popular. Okay? And in this country, at one time, we had something called mass circulation general interest magazines. This was before the internet. Magazines like Life and Look and the Saturday Evening Post, and almost every household in America subscribed to one of these general interest magazines. And this is where a lot of Americans got their photojournalism and their information about the world outside. What about the medium of radio? Okay, radio's popular stage began in 1920. KDKA is recognized as the very first commercial full-service licensed radio station. It went on the air in Pittsburgh in 1920. And radio exploded in the 1920s. It became the dominant medium in America. Okay, and it held that position for several decades up through the early 1950s. Radio was the number one medium in America. What about television? Television was introduced to the public in 1939 at a huge event called the New York World's Fair. And then World War II came along, and a few things had slowed down the development of television. But by the 1950s, TV was ready to explode into the popular stage. And in the 1950s, TV began to replace radio as the dominant medium, as the most important piece of furniture in the household. And the popular stage of TV existed up through the end of the 1970s until we saw the development of cable TV. All right, now one thing to talk about in the popular stage of both radio and TV is to point out several characteristics. One is that this stage, okay, the popular stage, was an era of domination by just a handful of networks. There were 3 or 4 networks that controlled almost all of radio and TV during the popular stage. So the popular stage of both radio and TV was an era of network domination. People had limited choices, only a handful of networks, unlike today where we have tens of thousands of choices. And not only were there limited choices, there was a high degree of consonance or similarity in the programming. The networks were kind of interchangeable in many ways. Now, let me point out a couple of other products that went from the elite stage to the popular stage. First, the camera. Before Kodak introduced the Brownie camera in 1900, very few people even had access to photography. It was very expensive, and only the elites could afford it and knew how to take pictures. Okay, but when Kodak introduced this device called the Brownie, it brought photography to the masses. It brought snapshots and selfies to the everyday person, a cheap, disposable cardboard camera. Okay. And it was very inexpensive. Okay, let's look at automobiles. Prior to Henry Ford and the Model T, you had to be rich to own an automobile. Okay, and it was a product aimed at the elites, but Henry Ford, because of the assembly line, was able to develop a low-cost automobile for the masses called the Model T, and he sold tens of millions of these cars, and it led to a complete revolution in the way that the society operated. It became much more mobile. And you could get this car in any color you wanted, as long as it was black. But this is, I think, 2 great examples of other products that evolved into the popular stage and became mass hits. All right, now after the popular stage, most media and other products enter the specialized stage, where they start to appeal to and are consumed by fragmented sections of the audience, specialized segments of the population, special interest segments of the population. The content gets much more specialized. Think of the world of magazines. At one time we had a handful of all-purpose general interest mass circulation magazines, but now we've got Dozens and dozens, although magazines are kind of a dying medium, we still have hundreds of specialized publications focusing on any topic you're interested in. Even newspapers are highly specialized today. They have special sections, different sections: real estate, finance, style, book reviews, sports, all kinds of specialized information in the print world. The print world has really always been very specialized. Now, during which decade did U.S. radio enter the specialized stage? When did specialization start to occur in radio? Well, it happened in the 1950s. That's when radio became much more specialized. And the rise of which technology forced radio to become a specialized medium? The answer is television. The rise of TV, people started to turn to TV. It left radio without a real huge mass audience, so radio had to respond. So radio responded by shifting from general kind of network programming to much more specialized programming. And we saw in the 50s the development of something called a radio format. And that's the overall content of the broadcast station, the sound of the station. Okay, there are many formats, and they're all designed to reach very specifically defined, narrow segments of the listening population. There are dozens and dozens of specialized radio formats. Okay? And even a genre like rock has many sub-genres. Okay? Classic rock, for example. Okay? Alternative rock. Many other examples we could talk about. Okay? Right now, in America, the top radio formats are news and talk, something called contemporary hit radio, and country radio. Now let's talk about TV. TV was in its popular stage for several decades, okay? But at some point it started to become much more specialized. When did this happen? Well, it happened in the 1980s, okay? And it happened because of the rise of certain technologies. Which technologies enable TV to become specialized? The answer is A, cable and home video. The 1980s was the decade of choice for people. For the first time, they could get cable TV and home video, and this brought dozens and dozens of new specialized forms of content into the consumer and their homes. Okay. So the EPS model, elite, popular, specialized. This can be applied to everything from cameras to computers to automobiles to different forms of mass communication. Okay. Television becomes very specialized. It was because of the rise of cable TV, which, it really grew in the 1980s and gave people many more specialized programming services. And videotape allowed people to watch much more specialized forms of programming than they could get from network television. So now there's incredible specialization in the cable world. Hundreds of specialized channels dedicated to many different sorts of specialized topics. Here's some more evidence of the end of the popular stage of TV and the rise of the personalized stage. Just look at the share of network television, the audience of network television during prime time. Share refers to the percentage of all the audience members watching a particular channel or set of channels at a particular time. Back in the 60s, the three TV networks had more than 90% share of the audience during prime time, during the evening, when most people are watching TV. Okay? By 2008, that had been cut almost in half. Okay? Where did all those audience members go? They were shifting to cable TV and video cassettes. And now, of course, they're watching streaming and all kinds of other video offerings that are available in today's very rich media world. So if we look at the history of TV, we can really start to divide it into stages, okay? The elite stage of experimentation, the popular stage, which was the era of network domination, and then the specialized stage, which we refer to as narrowcasting, not trying to reach a broad audience, but a narrow slice of the audience, narrowcasting. So the EPS model, elite, popular, specialized pattern of media development. Now, what's the next stage beyond the EPS model? Well, I think it's obvious. If we just look around, we see the rise of personalized media and personalization and customization, individualized media. So I think it's obvious that we can extend this early model, elite, popular, specialized, and add a fourth stage of evolution, the personalized stage. In the personalized stage, the media get customizable, and they're consumed by people seeking really individualized gratifications and experiences. And the media start to become, you can start to individualize, customize. Right? So you might think of this little upside down pyramid as a sort of a way to illustrate this. In the popular stage, we're talking about broadcasting, a handful of sources reaching a very broad audience. In the narrowcasting stage, the specialized stage, we have smaller audiences that are chopped up into special interest segments. But in the personalized stage, it's kind of an audience of one. It's really kind of microcasting, really focusing on the needs of one individual. Okay? So this is a huge shift. Maybe it means the decline of kind of mass communication to a more highly personalized communication world. And the driving force behind personalization, of course, it's all the advances in digital technology, especially AI, which really helps us, individualize, customize our media experiences. Okay, but digital means we get more choices. We get more systems that are integrated. We get more interactivity. We get better search tools. Then we get the ability to customize the media messages. Digital gives us so many advances, including this concept of personalization. Okay, so this is about individualization, a new world where we kind of self-define our media exposure. And really think about it, in this world, it's all about me and what I want, when I want it. Okay? Now, I went back and reread Marilyn Lowenstein, who gave us the original EPS model, and they predicted all of this coming. They wrote about something in the future called the personal retrieval stage, in which a person could retrieve vast amounts of material from computers. Ooh, that sounds like the current world of cloud computing and streaming. So I think they saw all of this coming even before the technology had emerged, like the internet. Anyway, so personalization is a powerful trend. This is where we get information and entertainment delivered to us that's designed to satisfy our individual needs and gratifications. And of course, this comes to us through digital media delivery systems. So this can take a lot of various faces, okay? Some of this is just cosmetic, our own ringtones, our own backgrounds, our own personalized avatars. I think a lot of this is just cosmetic, but some of it's really much more powerful and important. Okay, some of it we define, we pick the stuff that we want, but other times we've got computers helping, sending us recommendations, okay, that match our interest, our individual interests and needs. Okay? And this is where it's really growing, the computer-assisted forms of personalization. Examples of this computer-assisted approach would be the recommendations that get sent to us through by Amazon, Netflix, okay, almost any internet site that we use to absorb messages, media messages, is going to start making recommendations aimed just at us. So there's many other examples of personalized media and messages out there today. I'm sure you can think of some. Just walking around with your own music mix is an example of a personalized approach to absorbing media content. But think about things like Pandora and Spotify. Yes, you make your own playlist. Okay, you listen to the music that you want to listen to in the order that you want to listen to it, and it can also make a lot of recommendations about music you might like. Okay? All of the video on demand, the streaming services, okay, and the digital video recorders really help us personalize our media worlds. They give us more power to pick the content that we want and record the content that we want and watch it when we want to. This gives us incredible power to individualize our media worlds more than ever. Okay, like Netflix, okay, a great example of personalization. It gives us personalized profiles, recommendations. Okay, any recommendation service is really an attempt to highly personalize media content. Okay? And the world of apps is highly specialized. Apps save you time by bringing your favorite content right to you on your phone. Okay? And we all have different apps that match our individual interest. All the new smart TVs that are connected to the internet that have, all of these apps inside of them, ranging from social media to streaming of media content, allow us more than ever to personalize the devices. And then look at the rise of user-generated content on the Web 2.0, Facebook, YouTube, blogs, Twitters. This is all highly personalized. So there's some evidence, I think, to support the idea that we've entered the personalized stage of development of the media. So I expect you to understand the elite stage, the popular stage, the specialized stage, and then a little bit about the personalized stage. If you have a handle on that, I think you have a good understanding of how media evolve. Okay, so that's all I've got. Please take care of yourself and each other, and I'll see you soon. So long.